I think up what I think you think, and then I adjust my behavior based on what I thought you thought, but I never checked with you. And now I'm upset that you're not responding the way that I thought you should based on what I thought you wanted. So now I'm resentful at you, but I think you've done something to me. But if you ever called me selfish, I'm pissed off because all I do is think about you.
Seema, we've got another great episode of the Happy and Human podcast. How are you today?
I am thrilled because we have so much going on. We have juicy stuff this time. Like, you know how we all have these taboo topics in South Asian culture.
Yeah.
And we are going to dive right into some pretty juicy stuff.
We've got none other than someone who I think is very similar to a lot of us and a lot of our listeners. Every time I read about this dude, I hear about him, or I listen to him talk, I'm just reminded of so much goodness in the world. Seema, we've got Phillip Naithram with us. Hey, Phillip, how are you?
I'm great. How you doing?
We're doing good. We're doing good. So, listeners, Phillip Naithram is in the DC area. I haven't met him. He's about a couple of minutes away from my house. We kind of know the same people, but now we're finally connecting. He's an executive coach. He's a keynote speaker. He's a CrossFitter. He is just an all-around rock star. Seema, you've known Phillip for quite a while. You want to tell us a little bit about how you guys got connected and how this lovely, amazing human being who is all things happy and human is on our screen right now?
Yeah, I met this happy human in an interesting way. So my version of the story is I met Phillip through a colleague of mine who is a West Point grad, and he does a lot of, we're on a contract together, a coaching contract together. And he introduced me to Phillip because he was, and admittedly, I thought partly why Brennan wanted to have us meet was because we're both brown. Like there was definitely a part of me where I'm like, are you just like putting me in with all of your brown friends and just saying like, hey, you guys should be friends? Like, but I definitely quickly saw why Brennan needed me to meet Phillip, because he is, as you said before we hit record, a breath of fresh air. I think a lot of what Phillip's life has been about is just so shocking in ways, because again, it's covered by taboo and, you know, all of this stuff, but he's had such an incredible experience with some pretty hard stuff in life, and he's turned it around and done, you know, he's changing lives, which is just incredible. So, Phillip, if you want to add anything to that, you go right ahead.
No, I mean, we'll get into a lot of stuff in the podcast. I appreciate being here with both of you. And yeah, Brennan, you know, Brennan and I were on the phone, and he's like, you know, you got to meet this person, Seema. You guys sound exactly alike, and I think you'd hit it off. And just the conversation we were having at the time, he's like, I talk to her about stuff like that all the time. And and immediately that one conversation just, I don't remember. Yeah, it was like we connected on LinkedIn, and then it was like, oh yeah, this guy knows, he knows what he's talking about. And
there's all these, and there's so much weird crossover. Like he's not an only child, but he grew up for many years as an only child. I'm an only child. You know, father was in auto repair. My dad, like how many brown men, like Indian uncles, did their livelihood in auto repair? Like that's, I don't know. It's very, very, very serendipitous. So it felt like you were leading a very parallel life to me.
Yeah, Dad was a front-end alignment mechanic. I think, that was one of the first things like, oh, really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, Phillip, we're going to get into a lot of things today. Just looking at our outline, we're going to come full circle many, many times. But before we get started, before we get into the interview, take 20 seconds or 30 seconds and tell our listeners where are they going to end up at the end of this episode. What is a nugget that they're going to walk away with? What are we going to hope to leave them with? We want to incite them or invite them to listen to this entire episode, because I think it's going to be a great episode.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I think, most people, I encourage them to not believe everything they think. There was big part of my life is where I just believed whatever popped into my head. And over the last 10 years of my life, I've learned systematically and slowly over time how to not do that. And it shifted my perception of everything in the world, the way that I look at myself and how I fit into the world, the way that I look at other people and how they fit into the world. It shifted my perception, changed my automatic negative thoughts into automatic positive thoughts for the most part.
Yeah.
and it's given me a whole new lens, and that really is the spiritual awakening that a lot of us talk about.
Hmm.
And
Mm.
for me, that came from a pretty, other people would call it tragic. I'll describe it to you later, but it's the best thing that I got going on. It's what I infuse in my management consulting and in our organization, as well as every other organization I touch. But we don't have to believe everything we think, and there's a lot more going on here than we realize with our five senses. And if we can just stop for a second and absorb that, I think, just that little bit,
Mm.
Hmm.
it changes everything about our life.
What do you think most people generally believe on default? Like they're believing a lie that most people think.
I think most of us just believe that, like, that internal voice is our subconscious, and that internal voice is like God talking to us, or that's our best thought. That's our first, I didn't realize that inner roommate, as Mickey Singer calls it. Like, I didn't know that. I never stopped to think, like, wait a minute, I'm in there listening too.
Hmm.
Like, the voice
Mhm.
is talking, but I'm listening.
Yeah.
Like, and I always thought that was my better judgment. I didn't realize that was ego.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
didn't
just,
realize that was the fear voice of ego saying, no, don't do that because insert whatever.
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. I run a channel on Instagram. It's a 5 a.m. club. And yesterday I talked about ego. And I realized through a lot of conversations that people, in my humble opinion, mistake ego for arrogance, right? Like if you, in common
Right.
parlance, right? When you talk about someone like, hey, we'll just use me, pick on me today. Dinesh has got a big ego, right? That means he's got a big head. He thinks he's better than everyone else. He's got a superiority complex, right? But that's not exactly right. Ego is that mask, that identity that talks to us about protecting us, that, well, no, you can't do that, or that's not right, or that won't work. When we start to think in terms of I or me, like I can't do that,
Mhm.
or that won't work for me, or whatever it comes up in your mind, we have to pay attention to that. That is your ego. And I love where this conversation is going already, in that listening to that and not believing it, or choosing not to believe it and not taking it for gospel, can really make a huge difference in the way you approach things.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's positive and negative ego. We
Right.
can have spiritual ego, but it, I like to think in terms of absolute value, right? One and negative one are the same exact thing. They're just going in different directions,
Yeah.
right? So it's more about a direction than a destination. Which way is the compass pointing?
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's so quick. It's so easy to dismiss everything we don't understand and, kind of separate ourselves out from like, well, Philip is saying this. Here's all the reasons why that's wrong. Because that's what keeps our ego intact, right? That's when we're
Mhm.
learning something or we hear something from someone that really is kind of directionally different, right? It
Mhm.
it can be scary because it's like, well, if you're right, that means I'm wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. We hear, like, if you challenge some old belief that I've always had that has kept me safe this long, and it's the one I've always had, it's always worked because I've always proven myself right, because that's how the subconscious works. We always prove ourselves right. It's
Yeah.
more about it, I mean, good or bad, right? We will prove
Mhm.
ourselves right, and we will work to do that. So if we think, everything is all bad and nothing good ever happens to me, we will find ways to prove that right. If we think that, I never get sick, so I don't have to worry about getting the cold or whatever, we will find ways to prove ourselves right. And
Exactly.
when someone comes along and changes or challenges our old belief, we oftentimes don't, we hear it, well, if they're right, that means I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, then I'm bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And those things aren't equal.
Right.
Now
Yeah,
we can
there's
talk about
shame.
humility.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
Yeah.
One interesting change I've just made in the last 2 or 3 days in my life. Um, Picture a scenario. Let's say you're at work in management consulting or someone, you're trying to solve a problem, right? And someone throws out a solution, and that solution resonates with you. You agree with it. In the past, my reflex response would be, you're right, I agree with that, right? And I've taken a step back, and I don't know if it's right or wrong. Well, who knows what's right or wrong any longer? And I've shifted my language to, instead saying you're right, to just I agree. right? At that time, we both think that is the right solution. In so many things, even like in parenting or whatever, we think it's right not to let our kids play video games, for example, just as an example. But is it really right if we're, stifling the world's next best video game creator by not allowing them to explore and learn from that? And so as you're saying, Philip, it's reminding me that the subtle changes, even though it sounds so trivial, that instead of saying, hey, Dinesh or Philip or Seema, I think you're right, we should run paid ads for the podcast, simply changing to I agree could add a little bit of space to protect our ego or not protect or whatever, like you said, an absolute value. So
Mhm.
I am totally on board with that kind of thinking.
What do you guys think about polarity thinking? Both and, right? Even let's say you didn't agree.
Yeah,
It could still be both and. Okay, well, I don't agree. It could still be both and. That could also, just because I don't agree doesn't make it true. And this other thing could also be true
absolutely.
as well.
Yeah.
Like that sort of like, going back to absolute value, polarity thinking kind of just really helped me. I'd love to hear how you guys frame the word humility.
Hmm.
For I took the long way around and the hard road to learn that means an accurate self-appraisal.
Hmm.
I'm not too much and I'm not too little. I always used to think if I said bad things about myself or I didn't say positive things about myself, it meant I was being humble.
Hmm.
But I didn't realize, even calling myself the biggest piece of shit in the world was a grandiose statement. That's a huge egotistical statement to say, even though it feels like I'm saying, like, no, I'm saying
Mhm.
I'm not good, or I'm not good at that thing, but you guys are. I didn't realize that was an ego statement.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime judgment, right? Like that is, I think, from my brain, the simplest way that I know that I'm in my ego state, right? If I'm thinking with limited options, yes or no, right or wrong, good or bad, I like it, I don't like it. That's it. And so I think one of the biggest discoveries I made was I can feel anger and be at peace at the same time. You can have
Hmm.
both.
Yeah, because we're not our
It's
emotions, right? We feel the
right.
emotions, but that's not who we are as an individual.
Yeah.
Right. Right. You can be at peace while feeling anger, while feeling frustration, while feel like,
Mhm.
and that's a hard concept for a lot of people. I think, full transparency, I would have dismissed that as like, you're an idiot if I had heard that 10 years ago. Like, you just don't know. If you're angry, you're not happy. You're not at that. You can only be happy if you're at peace, you know, poke holes, poke holes, poke holes. So I think humility falls right into that. Where am I? An accurate self reflection of where I am, without regard for what other people might think of me, what they are thinking of me, how I think they're thinking of me. Like, it's all an illusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think up what I think you think, and then I adjust my behavior based on what I thought you thought, but I never checked with you. And now
Mhm.
I'm upset that you're not responding the way that I thought you should based on what I thought you wanted. So now I'm resentful at you, but I think you've done something to me. But if you
Right.
ever called me selfish, I'm pissed off because all I do is think about you.
Right.
Wait, bro, hold up. That sounded like a rap song that you have been practicing. Like that came out just way too smooth.
Yeah. Well, when you have to destroy selfish and self-centeredness or understand it in a different way, you get to a point where you really understand that scenario pretty well. But if you think about what I just described, everything I just said, I made it sound like I'm thinking of you, but really I'm thinking of how you think of me. So
Right.
that's still self-centered,
Yeah.
selfish and self-centered. But if you call me selfish and self-centered in that moment, what are you talking about? All I do is walk around all day worried about what other people think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so, but everything I just described there, I think up what I think you think, and I adjust my behavior based on what I thought you thought to create the reaction out of you that I wanted you to have based on what I thought you wanted. What did I just describe there? Lack of boundaries, abandonment, selfish and self-centeredness, thinking way too much about what other people think of me. Like, and it's like, why am I owning your decision making? Why am I owning your emotions and
Mm,
determine what you even want to, and then
right.
adjusting my behavior based on what I thought it was. And I never once checked with you. I could have just asked.
Yeah. So true. Let me push in a little bit. Not that I don't agree. I agree with everything you say. But I spent a lot of time in the Tony Robbins camp, right? If you're familiar with Tony Robbins, um,
UPW.
yeah, UPW, Date with Destiny, Business Mastery, all of it. Um, he talks about the six human needs.
Mm.
And one of them is significance, right? And when you say, I drive the worst car on the planet, or I'm the biggest piece of shit, or whatever it is, you're still chasing significance in some aspect. And I agree, that's fake humility, right? That's the other side of the number line. You're a -1 as opposed to +1. So for me, humility comes, I actually think that when is someone being humble? When am I being humble? Is when I'm not thinking about myself, right?
Mhm.
And I think about with my relationship with my kids, right? I'm not thinking about how I can be significant in their life. I'm thinking more as a servant leader. What can I do to give them the best? How can I create an opportunity? What can I do? But at some level, we can't get rid of our need to be significant. None of us can, right? We
Right.
all have a desire to be part of a group, part of a tribe. We want to feel valued. We want to feel validated. We want to know we're special, right? A lot of us, we want to know we're special, even if we're not going to come out and say it. So talk to us a little bit about that aspect of significance, and where do we find it if it isn't in your so eloquent rap song? That I mean, those rhymes were
I
were
know.
were lit. Were lit. I gotta say,
Yep.
those were lit. I gotta go back and listen to those episodes so I can write it down because it was just so smooth.
There's degrees of intensity, right? I mean, because at some point at some point you reach a point where you're at an intensity with your desire to feel significant, where you're using other people's opinion of you to feel significant. My kids were happy with me and they called me a good dad, so that meant I did a good job. When you could have easily been doing a good job and they never said that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But yeah, we do have a need to feel significant and a contributing member and a feeling of service to others. That's why when we do something nice for another person and we are of service to someone, that gives us a feeling of fulfillment that no external achievement or
Right.
certification or trophy could ever give us, because we added value to another person's life in a way that we can feel in our energy, not just I look, we'll get to it later. I got sober. I've done a ton of, homeless shelters because I was homeless for a while. And like, they never articulate that they're happy that you're there. They usually don't like that you're there because they don't want to be there. And they're like, what is he going to tell me?
Mm-hmm.
But when you are of service to someone and you help them do something, or even helping a friend move,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether they buy you pizza for lunch or not, you feel the joy that they experience with lifting that couch with you because they would have never been able to do it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so that fills you with a feeling of significance.
Yeah.
And you feel like you are a part of the tribe. And naturally, we don't want to get kicked out of the tribe because when we are alone, we die. We hunt together.
Right.
But at some point, when we are now, but when you get to a certain point of intensity where you are now, it's now a form of attachment that you have where you are using other people's energy to feel significant.
Mm-hmm.
You are using other people you can no longer feel significant and content on your own, knowing that you are a good person. You have now created an identity around, I am only valuable if other people are saying
Mm-hmm.
kind things about
Mm-hmm.
the behavior
Mm-hmm.
that I experienced with them, the thing that I did for them, or, then you find yourself saying phrases, well, I'm doing this for you.
Right.
Right. When you are going against your will to do something that you remember, now I'm only talking about you. If you are going against your will to do something that you've determined would be helpful for someone else and upset that they're not thanking you for it, you have now crossed that line of intensity where you're no longer in your sphere of feeling significant. You're using that other person to try to make yourself feel significant.
Right.
Yeah. It's manipulative.
Yeah.
It's manipulative. And
Yeah.
importantly, I think one of my favorite things to say is it's not the action that you're taking. It's the intention behind the action that you take, right? So
Right.
if I help you move, thinking like, well, if I help Philip move, then the next time my internet goes down, I can call him and he'll just run right on over and drop everything. Like I have to basically add to the bank here, the friend bank, so that he'll owe me something when I know I'm going to need to cash in, right? That's not the same as, and then you have you touched on it. You have expectations. And when those expectations don't get met, then you create that judgment, right? That egoic, like they're right or I'm right, they're wrong. They should have. It's just that like you feel that resentment, like I did all this for you. Why aren't you, why didn't you this? Why didn't you that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to understand for yourself when you're taking any action. Is it really rooted in a place of peace? Is it really rooted in a place of, I'm truly wanting to help you because you're a human being on this planet, and helping you only helps the world. And if the world's better, I'm better, right? Like I'm
And
in my
that's
dharma,
service.
right?
That's service. That's significance, right? That's, we covered both sides there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me paint a less a more realistic, not realistic, but more a simpler example, and I want to hear how you guys react to this, right? And let's say there's a listener that's out there, I don't know, mid 40s, got a mom that lives somewhere, and the mom loves when their daughter or son comes home, and the mom likes to cook what they believe the daughter or son likes, right? And daughter or son doesn't really like that, but doesn't really feel like telling their mom that I don't really want that. Maybe it upsets their tummy. They're not craving it, but they're like, my mom is really old and it brings her so much joy. So let me do this for her to please her, right? Now, I totally agree with what you said. I think that the most critical thing that you said in the last part, Philip, was that there's degrees of intensity, right? And I think we're along a spectrum where I think if you want to eat it, if you want to do that, and you feel that that brings your mom some pleasure, or you can substitute whoever you want in this scenario, right? Nothing wrong with that. But I think that at some point, if you're doing it, is there some ego there where you're now taking responsibility and you're now controlling and dictating the feelings of emotion out of some sort of obligation? Like, I'm still processing this scenario that someone brought to me, but I'd love to hear what both of you guys say on that, and help us with a scenario that many of us might feel in familial relationships, friendships, work relationships, where we're doing something because we think that it makes the other person feel good.
Yeah. I mean, there was so much there in that example, and we all have parents. It's funny. Who knows how exhausting it might be for that parent to make that meal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
all they're waiting for is their son or daughter to be like, you don't really have to do this anymore. Like when I was growing up, I really loved it, but what I like is to spend time with you, and you don't have to go through that extra work.
Mm-hmm.
And then let them say, whatever they say. So no, I like doing it. It's like, well, it actually, as I've gotten older, it's hurt my digestive tract has changed, and then you can judge if you can sense that they want the way that they show love, right? It may not be the way you receive love, but the way they show love is by making you food. Give them a meal that you do like, and they will just start making that, because it's not about that particular meal. It's about the act of making a meal for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now you've used some self-awareness and some empathy, and you did a little judo move on them. It's like, they're making me this, and now I'm all bloated. I got to go, like, all right, hey, what do we, or give them some space. Like, thank God, because I'm sick and tired of making this. My hands are cramping. I'm old now. Like, well, I was doing this because I thought you liked it.
Yeah.
Um, but it takes a lot to get there, I think. Like, I know we talked a lot about this with reparenting and learned helplessness, and there's a lot that goes into that relationship, because all the buttons are there and they've been there for a while and they got installed a long time ago. So it may be hard to have that conversation, because if you're not used to communicating well, and this is just what you do, you kind of are going through the motions. The question I would ask you is, like, do either one of you benefit from that?
Yeah.
Do you walk away feeling more energized or less energized with that interaction? And if you're feeling it, I'm sure they are too. They may not be articulating it, but it's okay to evolve past their emotional state. They may not be able to where they are, but you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seema, I want to hear what you think. One part that I feel a lot of people, and including myself, we skip over, is that we don't realize that we're taking responsibility for that person's emotions, right? We're commandeering how they're going to feel based on something we do or we don't. And we've got to realize that like we go so fast past that and realize that their emotions have nothing to do with what we do or don't do. Seema, how would you handle that? What do you think?
There's a lot of trauma behind this right now for me, honestly. There's a lot of trauma here for me personally. So, gosh,
Did you want to skip it?
I don't know. I'm okay with it being. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. I think I want to keep this in. It is exhausting to continuously own someone else's emotions, particularly your parents, because I'm not going to, say as South Asians, it's more so, but I will say that in our culture, that reverence, that unquestioned reverence to the elders is very centric. So I think, I think it's very easy to spend your time. You mentioned, masking, like you kind of get used to this low grade stimulus of stress, right? Your body just sort of gets used to that. And so it's normal for you to consistently, subconsciously be thinking, well, this is the status quo, like the parents with the food. And you try to I mean, even simple things like if I don't call every week, they're not going to call back. Or they're not going to pick up the phone. And then, but I'm still owning, I'm going to hear about if I don't call for whatever reason. I was out of the country, kids are sick. I just don't feel like it. You're going to own that, like I'm going to hear about how like I'm this type of son, this type of daughter. I haven't called. You don't like the food that I make. It just is. It's so dependent on where your parents are, where you are. I know this is such an abstract, roundabout way of maybe not even answering the question clearly for some people. And guys, I'm sorry if that's the case, but for those of you who are in it with a particular family member, I think this will resonate. I think you'll kind of get what I'm saying here. And I just want to encourage people to understand, give yourselves permission to evolve past, as Philip said, what is. And if that means that you're no longer on the same page, that's okay. You can still hold space for that person and understand that like my parent has this expectation or this whatever, and you don't need to allow then your own sense of peace to become wavered as a result. That's just a monumental task, but that's the work.
Yeah. How much inner child stuff have you guys talked about on the show?
No.
None? ACA, adult child, the idea?
Not much at all. You want to get into a little bit of it?
Yeah, because I've had to do right, and it's. I mean, my path was. I mean, I had to get sober first. That was the first thing.
Well,
you solved it.
Philip, pause, because I think I want to share. We've kind of told the listeners that we'll get into it, and we really haven't shared how you wound up crashing into a brick wall, right?
Yeah.
So I really want the listeners just to hear this.
Yeah. I mean, so the other part of like the reason why I get to speak the way that I do about adult children and, some of the personal development things that I infuse into my work and be able to actually help other people is because I've had to do it on my own. I'm 10 years sober. I'm 9 and a little bit years sober, almost 10 years sober. And that was that was a hard time, right? At age 31, at age 30 in 2013, I gave away everything I owned. So I systematically started giving away all of my clothes and just gave away everything I own. I had recently been terminated from yet another job. Like I was pretty rough. At the time, I was drinking a half a gallon of vodka every day, two 22-ounce beers every day, cutting myself with a little tiny screwdriver from the eyeglass repair kit, bleeding from the ass, throwing up bile. I was rough, right? But there was no amount of physical pain that was going to get me to stop my behavior because I had just gotten used to, well, life is shitty and this is the way it is. And I just slowly and systematically started to get rid of everything I owned. I short sold my condo. I like to say it that way, but Bank of America short sold my condo. I just happened to be on the deed as well.
Yeah.
It was a team effort. I called up CarMax and was like, "Hey, come pick up the truck." And they laughed on the phone. It's like, it's not how you sell your car. And I stopped paying that bill, and they came and picked up that truck. So I won. And I had planned to die. The whole point of this was that I had planned to die. I was ready to just finally die. And I felt like pieces of my body were shutting down, and overall sense of apathy and self-hatred, my internal like fat, ugly piece of shit. Like I would look in the mirror and just, railroad myself. And I just thought that I could self-deprecate myself into better behavior. I wanted to change. I didn't know how to and what to do. So I had planned to die in 2013. And it turns out you can't just decide I'm going to die and then drop dead. That's not how that works. I kept on living. So I move in with some Craigslist people in 2014, and series of events. I planned out my whole suicide. I'm like, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna hang myself, and like I'm gonna do it. Right, little by little, I was inching closer and closer to the edge. When I was waiting for the bus to come, like hoping something else would happen and take me out, and I was ready to go. And for whatever reason, I got it into my head that afternoon. I was drunk, and it was 4:30 in the afternoon. My Craigslist roommates were out of town, but for whatever reason, I got it in my head. Wait a minute, today's Wednesday. I don't want to die without seeing the season finale of Law and Order SVU. So I waited, right, and I passed out and forgot what I was supposed to do the next morning, and a whole shenanigans. And a couple weeks later is when I got sober, and so I got sober with help. Used 12-step recovery. Nothing I say, have your own experience with 12-step recovery. We stay anonymous and press and all these things, but it's a format that works and has worked for me. And that process, what people don't realize is the process of getting sober is designed to do one thing. It's to bring you to a relationship with the power outside of yourself. Alcoholism, as I've come to understand it, is a physical craving for more alcohol when I ingest alcohol, and a mental obsession to get it when I don't have it. Similar to it affects the body in a similar way of an allergic reaction. When I ingest that, I'm not choosing to do this. I literally feel the crawling. I feel a physical craving for more alcohol that never seems to occur in every normal tempered drinker. Without alcohol, I feel restless, irritable, and discontented. And what I didn't realize was that was a God-sized hole that lived within me. The solution to that was a spiritual solution to my physical problem. So the point of the steps is a spiritual program of action designed to bring you, its experiencer, into a relationship with the power outside of yourself. You need not call it God.
Yeah.
You can use other people. It can be a doorknob, and people are like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, well, depends on how bad you got to pee and which side of the bathroom door you're on.
Right.
That's true.
You're going to put your trust that when you turn that handle, it's going to work and you're going to find relief. That's all that it means.
Yeah.
But the process of doing that over the last 10 years has exposed a lot of me to myself, and a lot of the me that was already there. My problem was not drinking. My problem was me. I had a spiritual malady that existed within me, and I was trying to solve it with alcohol. I was trying to make myself feel better about the things that were going on within me with this external substance that worked instantaneously. And it continued to work until it didn't work anymore. Right? I mean, I was at a point where I could drink a half a gallon and still be like, well, this shit ain't working. Now what?
Yeah.
Right?
So it sounds like at some point that you turned to alcohol and alcohol aggravated, like you said, that spiritual hole that was in you, right? And I looked at your LinkedIn. You worked at a big bank. You worked at some real estate companies and things like that. And how did I'm trying to phrase the question correctly? How did that that spiritual malady, I think that those are your words. How did that manifest itself before alcohol came into play and masked itself as the solution? Like how was that showing up? What was a symptom of that when you were working at, this big local bank, I don't want to say the name, or these other real estate companies and doing all the things that from the outside, like Seema has here in the outline, uh, you know, had the aunties buzzing and they're like perfect on the outside.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, now we're touching to that adult child. We're getting into some of that, right? Like, so teenage Philip, look, I was a 4.29 student. I had a part-time job. I was doing the best I could to take care of my brother or like be around with my parents to do that. Didn't really, you know, I wasn't like constantly going out or out of the house. Was the good little boy, right? I could make you like me.
Yeah.
I was the person that if I could just get you to like me, then that meant I was okay.
Hmm.
And I learned how to do that from a very young age. And I learned how to do that with schoolwork and with, whatever, the social chameleon, right? I'm going to adjust my behavior to think up what I think you think, and I'm going to make you like me. And it's going to work. So, gravitating in a professional environment to some sort of forward facing, customer facing role, whether it's sales or, project management, but entitlement work just kind of fit because I can, like, I was satisfied. I was pushing that button.
Hmm.
And it wasn't that I started drinking at age 19. I was running track, playing football in high school. And then after high school, I realized, like, what am I working out for? I don't know why I had that thought, but I was like, because I was still working out, like, as if though I was playing a sport, but I wasn't. Um, and I started drinking at night. I mean, I'd had alcohol before then. Um, but somewhere in there, it just made me feel better about being me. It made my skin fit in a different way.
Hmm.
Um, there was a girl at one point. She's like, I like you better when you've had a few. You're not as uptight. You're not as like worried about what other people think of you all the time. You're not as trying to be all, proper. Like, you're loosened up. And I heard that in be drunk at all times to make people like you.
Yeah.
I want people to like me. This is how they like me. So I'm now going to do this. This is my life plan.
Hmm.
And it worked until it didn't work no more. It's a progressive thing,
Right.
Yeah.
right? At some point, I could do it once or twice a week. Well, I mean, I very quickly became a daily drinker because I was always a daily I want you to like me person.
Yeah.
And it's not her fault.
Yeah.
Like, I would have come to that. I already came to that conclusion. She just
Validated
articulated
it.
it for me.
She
And
validated it for you. Yeah.
yeah, and she's pretty, and it's like, oh, this worked. Like, there we go. Boom. Like,
Yep.
I'm just a guy, right? And so, yeah, I mean, and it was always there. And it was like my little secret. Like, how far can I push? I was always a gambler in that sense. How far can I push before I'm found out? So I was just as addicted to excitement as I was to the physical addiction to alcohol. In fact, the addiction to excitement is what was already manifested in me from a young age. Now we're getting into some of the ACA stuff, right? The fear of authority figures, right? Going back to um, parents and coaches and stuff. Well, fear and excitement feel the same way in the body. So if I constantly I'm constantly pushing limits and things, and like on the external, that looks like motivation and driven and all these other positive words, but I'm using it to solve that internal problem.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, that stopped working, but alcohol continued to.
Mm-hmm.
So I just did that.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually that was all I was doing. And over time, you start the day with a couple drinks, and it's like, well, I made up a little rule. I made up my own rules about life too. 5:30 a.m. still counts as the night before because the sun's down.
I love
So,
it.
I'm not drinking in the morning. That was last night. What are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Is it gone?
The desire? Yeah.
No, not the desire, not the desire. The thing that led you to wanting the approval, making people like you, then the alcohol. Is that can you what I'm asking is, can you get rid of that? Or have we become aware of it and we now accept it as part of us and we use that same God-given whatever it is, we've now recognized it's a gift and we could use it to serve us as opposed to letting it use us.
I want to think about this. words are the lowest form of communication, but the words we use matter. And I think so. I'm going back to the compass. It's a compass. It's a direction, not a destination. If I stop doing the things that I do to fill that God-sized hole within me and stop practicing those things that give me that sense of meaning and purpose in my life, then that malady will manifest itself. That compass will turn and I will go back to doing the things that I've always done. And I think when we think of things like addiction, we can talk about the brain and we can talk about dopamine and we can talk about these things. I mean, it's important too. But all of those words that we're describing with psychology and neurobiology, we're using words to describe what we are feeling inside spiritual. So I think to answer your question, is it gone? No, it's just as there as it's always been.
Yeah.
And it will always be there. And it's always been there. But through my worst thoughts and actions on a daily basis, I get to point my compass in another direction with the same intensity. I was good at drinking. I was good at destroying my life. I was really good at hating myself. I was really good at feeling sad. I was really good at resentment. I could think up as many things about strangers and hate them with a passion you would not believe. I was really good at that. And I could be equally good as being of service to as many people as I can, being the best version of myself on a daily basis and impacting as many lives positively as I can. But it's contingent on the daily maintenance of my spiritual condition. When I stop doing that, my default setting is a destructive mess. And
So
maybe others
Phillip,
don't have it.
yeah, I think you said spirituality a lot. You've said inner child healing, adult child stuff. These topics just really light me up inside. I really wholly believe them. I believe energy is what we're all made of, right? Whether that's the micro bacteria, whatever, I can't even think right now. But every size of organism, big to small, right, micro to macro, we're all a function of energy. Even the non-beings of like rocks, right? It's all energy. But for a lot of us that are listening to this podcast, I think these words and these concepts very easily tend to get dismissed as quote unquote woo woo, right? It's not real. It's not tangible. It's just something that they shut it down, which is fine. But speak more to that, because I think, that resistance to inner child, adult child energy, frequency, understanding that we're a function of that vibrational energy, denying the existence of it and the fact that we're affected by it is what's creating a lot of the dissonance for some of these listeners. Curious to know your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. We're all energy. I mean, if you believe that the MRI machine works and you even do 10 minutes worth of investigation of what it actually is, you'll quickly get to the point that, oh, we're just energy. But I'll do two things. One, I'll relate it to a little bit of alcoholism, and then we can talk about some other things with adult child. I mean, just because part of admitting that I was powerless over alcohol and that my life had become unmanageable, I was shaking and sweating uncontrollably when I didn't drink. It was very clear for me to see that, all right, I'm physically, I'm addicted to alcohol, but like my job title is project manager. My life's not unmanageable, right? All I do is manage my life, right? But just that if all I do is manage my life, if you have to manage it, it's by definition unmanageable, right? If you have to try to control something, it's by definition uncontrollable or out of control. Pure just by you even using that phrase. And so it was my thought process and my selfish and self-centeredness that I didn't realize was at the root of all of my problems. It was me. And when I say selfish and self-centeredness, it means that everything starts and begins with me. Not that I'm necessarily think that I'm better than you. In fact, I thought I was worse than you. I didn't realize that was grandiosity. I meant what I said. When I say that
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge piece of shit and I'm the worst person in the world, that is a grandiose statement. And that's very prideful. Who's to say that I'm the worst? I haven't even murdered. There's like tons of murderers. Like, you didn't do half as bad as those people. And so the idea is that I'm coming up with all the ideas and what I believe about other situations all by myself with no investigation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Herbert Spencer, the only principle that can keep you in everlasting ignorance is contempt prior to investigation,
Oh
right?
yeah.
When you think you believe before you go investigate and know.
Right.
So, speaking to the people that automatically dismiss it as woo woo and, that's fake, but this is real. Why? Because you happen to believe it. Well, why do you believe it? Because you've always believed it? Repetition of thought? Well, how did I change? I acted my way into a better way of thinking. I took actions in the opposite of what I thought or believed was a good idea. How is making coffee and hanging out with strangers and talking about things that I don't want to remember or talk about and doing personal inventory? What does this have to do? I just want to stop drinking and stop hating myself. What I need to do is get a job and start paying some of these bills. And when I don't have as much debt, then I'll feel better about myself. Then I won't have to drink. Don't you know that that's going to work? And one person asked, well, how's that working out for you so far?
Right.
Right. And so to get to your point of like, contempt prior to investigation,
Yeah.
who's to say, right? Go try it.
Yeah.
And
How willing are you to be wrong?
right. And what does willingness means, right? Willingness means taking the action because anything else is wanting or intention. And you can intend to do anything you want, but if you never actually take any action towards it, it never happens. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we happen to describe that as manifestation, right, emotionally attaching ourselves to a future state of which we would like to become, holding the vision of that in our mind and intentionally taking actions towards achieving it, and that becomes manifestation. You might be opposed to the word manifestation, but if I just said 1% better every day, small actions add up to the results, and you feel better about that, then move with that. We didn't say anything different.
Yeah. I have a quick follow-up. And so, just to summarize for the listeners, there is this time continuum, right? Where the woman or the female in high school said something to you about drinking. You're a project manager. You think everything is going well. You started drinking. You reasoned that 5:30 in the morning is the night before, until you're giving away your stuff. You're planning your suicide. There's this time continuum. Um, if you could go back to maybe 50% into that time continuum, before things got to the point of where you're learning from your body shivering and sweating, right? Or that things are just completely off the rails and you don't have your stuff anymore, you're going into default, your car's getting repossessed, things like that. If you can go back to someone who, a fictional listener, I don't know, Timo, you want to we make up these names of people. We'll,
Jyotsna.
Jyotsna,
I don't know.
let's say Jyotsna or Manu or someone is listening, and their life is good. They're managing their life. They've got two kids, but they just can't seem to shake a bad habit. Whether it's eating chocolate cake every night, or they just keep getting triggered. They keep getting angry, or they need a glass of wine every night, or they love to party on weekends. Whatever it is, whatever, because the remedy at that point could be anything, right? It's overworking, right? It's chasing success, chasing money, um, going to the casinos a lot, whatever it is. How would you counsel or advise that person to take a look and that maybe it's not so bad? Maybe it'll never get so bad, but there's a way to redirect that energy that on the flip side, if you were to do this through insight and guidance as opposed to tragedy and awareness, the way a lot of people have, that what's on the other side is so much better than you can imagine, that you're kind of fighting a struggle that you don't have to fight. And there's an easier way to get all the dopamine and the words that we can use in such a more productive way than beating yourself up. And before I shut up, I'll give you an example because I know you're thinking. So I have pretty severe ADHD with impulsivity, right? And for a long time, I would medicate myself, right? The doctors would prescribe it and I would medicate myself. And like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just focus? Why can't I get through a piece of paper? I'm a lawyer. I read and write for a living, right? Why can't I get through it? And then I learned that I could do all the things by allowing myself to be distracted, allowing myself to have TV playing in the background, right? Allowing myself to do multiple things. And I would still get there with a lot more ease, but I'd be making progress on many different fronts, right? So I learned to work with my gift and turn it into a superpower, put myself in positions where that was beneficial as opposed to harmful. What would you say to that person to help them redirect that intensity?
Well, let's think about it, right? So pain is the touchstone of all growth, I believe, right? Pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth. You're trying to grow along a spiritual line, it's going to suck for a while. And then you have a breakthrough. You're working out, you're trying to lose some weight, you got to put in a little bit of pain, it's going to suffer a little bit. And then on the backside is something great, right? But I do think we develop this narrative, it must hurt in order to be good enough. So anything that comes easily or feels good, we then kick against. But that's a separate thing. Going back to the person, the question is, why would they change, right? Why would they change if they believe everything is fine, right? There's plenty of people that call themselves a functioning alcoholic. I don't know what that really means. What I think if you ask them to define what they think functioning is, you'd be very surprised. And so would the people in their life that they think feel that they're functional. But, if it's someone who has said, I'd like to change, right? Because if they don't want to change, they won't do it. You can't make someone do anything else. We're like we talked about earlier, we're responsible for our own feelings, and that's universal, right? I'm responsible for my own anger. Someone else is responsible for their own sadness. I can't make you do or feel anything. No one can make you feel a certain way. You're feeling a certain way, and that other person exists in the world too. But if they've expressed a willingness that, hey, I'd really like to stop eating chocolate cake every day, right? Then, all right, well, just like part of the thing like, if you believe yourself to be a normal drinker and you don't need this, why don't you stop drinking for a year? See what happens, right? Try some controlled drinking, right? So whatever you're doing, like if it feels, see if you can still enjoy it and control it at the same time. If it's a real problem, you probably won't be able to. If you just heard that and your immediately thought was like, you know what, everybody has dessert, like everything in moderation, everything. And you have these phrases and these things, that's probably that's something to consider, right? I mean, if you could take it or leave it, that probably wouldn't have popped up in your mind as being the first thing. But I also don't think that while everyone has their own path to go to, and I don't want to rob someone of their bottom, whatever bottom is. Maybe it's just you watch too much TV or you watch whatever it is. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as me. I know we set the tone with fucking suicide and drinking and shit, but whatever, I don't want to rob you of your bottom, right? Because that's theft, right? You deserve to have your own experience with pain to cause you to make the shift and the changes, because your spiritual growth is directly proportional to the pain you were in, I believe. So by me trying to minimize it for you, I'm only prolonging the opportunity that you have to experience the thing that I know is a good idea. When I meet people, relating it back to something I've directly, so I would say I meet someone and they're like, hey, let's go to some meetings or whatever. Or they say, hey, I want to stop drinking. I'm like, all right, come to a meeting with me. No, I don't want to do that. All right, well, I move on.
Yeah.
When you're ready, we'll change.
You don't
have
take
to drag you.
Yeah.
You give them the dignity of having their own agency.
Right.
Yeah. Now, what I'm talking, right? Yeah, and it doesn't have to be as dramatic, right? Like for us, jails, institutions, and death, right? Those are the three options we have. We're going to wind up in one of those three. But you might just end up getting divorced, or you might just end up, like if you have some other problem, or you might just end up hating yourself for the rest of your life. But the problem is, just like when you realize that, a head full of a head full of a solution and a belly full of alcohol doesn't mix, right? Once you know that you don't have to be doing this, right? It's kind of like losing a bunch of weight, being in shape, and then gaining it back. At that point, you know what's possible. You're just doing it in spite of yourself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. But what you're describing here is something that comes to mind for me. I got asked this question yesterday at dinner. Was you're describing, homeless shelters and justifications and carrying emotional burdens for everybody else and chameleoning, right? All of these things are happening simultaneously for you, and then that resistance to change. How do you know when you're in the thick of it?
You don't. I didn't know I was crazy when I was crazy. I thought everybody else just hated me and I was doing what I was supposed to do. One day I'll die and the rest of you will have more air to breathe in case you were asthmatic or something like that. I don't know.
Right.
You don't. Well, I mean, there's equal, actually, so there was equal parts of me fighting it and thinking that I was eventually going to figure it out. I was going to keep doing what I was doing over and over again until it eventually worked, which we know is the definition of insanity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you don't. It usually does take a bottom of or some sort of external, or you meet someone.
Mm-hmm.
You meet someone who used to be the way you were and can speak to you on a level that you understand. We resonate, going back to waves and energy. The word resonate is literally speaking of sonic engineer, like sound waves.
Mm-hmm.
You meet that person and you match on an energetic level that you believe that this person used to live the way that you currently are.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're experiencing with your sight and your ears and the other senses is something totally different.
Right.
But you don't distrust this person. You know that they're communicating with you in a language that you understand. Whether it's my relationship with my wife or my husband used to be exactly like that. We would talk about this, and this, and we'd feel like that. And I would think this, but then I would think that. And then they insert the solution. We always talk about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And everything we talk about. That's why I always talk about it's the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me. Sounds tragic, but without it, I wouldn't get to be this person.
Right.
And when someone meets that and they get to see, well, I want that,
Mm-hmm.
then they do the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the best thing we can do is be that shining version.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Wallace Waddles. Right. We have a responsibility to become successful and as successful as we possibly can. Our failure helps no one. Our success can help many.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times we think commiserating in misery with others is fellowship.
Yeah.
So someone who has all the same circle of friends that all do the same behavior, that are all suffering in the same way, they feel like, well, everybody's like this. And I have friends and we're all this way and I'm fine because everyone else I know is this way.
Because I think the thick of it can feel like very different for different people. It's situational, it's circumstantial. And it is also, importantly, it's a matter of perspective, right? Where am I as compared to a point in future or a point in the past? So,
yeah, I mean, were you talking specifically about drinking, like watching someone bottom out? That's a hard thing to do.
Anything? No, I mean, the conversation at dinner last night was, this person was going through something unexpected and, it wasn't a desired outcome. It wasn't the goal. And now they're pivoting and finding, trying to find solid ground. And I mentioned the phrase, the thick of it, which resonated with them. And then they just looked at me and they're like, but how do I know if I'm in the thick of it? And I thought, that's just such a great podcast question, right? How do I know I'm in the thick of it? And my answer was the same as yours, right? It's so perspective based. You can look back and say, that's when I was in the thick of it. And also for me, sometimes you feel a wave of emotion or you feel something and you've done it enough to where you can recognize for yourself, I'm in the thick of it now. Importantly, it is ever evolving and impermanent. So I also know if I'm in the thick of it now, it will resolve or at least lessen later.
Yeah, I just a quick thought. I contemplated asking Philip the question to help us with the polarity, help us with the opposite. What does it look like when you're out of the thick of it, so we can back into knowing when we're in the thick of it? Like, what does that look like? But now I'm almost wondering, like, is the goal to get out of the thick of it? Or are we just, going through seasons of life, surfing the different waves that come at us? And for all we know, all three of us might be in quote unquote the thick of it.
Yeah.
And we're going through a season that's going to be, bookended with a change, followed by another season, followed by yet another change and yet another season. And I think a lot of times, we've seen this. Our podcast is called a Happy and Human Podcast, and I think it's a little bit of a play on words that it's in the pursuit of happiness, right?
Hmm.
I don't think that's the goal. I don't think we want to be happy all the time. I don't think we want to be out of the thick of it all the time. I think
No.
we want to go through lots of thicks of it and come out on the other side. And it's like you said, Seema, it's that evolution into the experience of life, being the best we can, seeing how far we can push ourselves, what we can do, what impact we can leave. And that is the journey that, we call life at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
So it gives us meaning. It gives us purpose. It gives us joy, to see how much we can climb and look back and say, wow, I scaled that mountain. And now I'm going to turn around and help the person behind me. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. I think happiness is a byproduct of
Yeah.
it's a byproduct of making small progresses. That's why accumulating small positives works, right? If you are,
Mhm.
to get you out of a state of negativity, or if you think about, DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy, and CBT, cognitive, but accumulating small positives, like I want, like, wake up at this time today. Okay, so do that, right? I want to fluff my pillows as soon as I wake up. Okay, then do that. And I want to brush my teeth within 5 minutes of waking up. Okay, then do that. And it could be the smallest, seemingly innocuous things, but we are adding up. We are hitting those small dopamine hits in our brain,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where we're taking those small actions, small positives, accumulating small positives, and equaling something. And that a byproduct of that is happiness. It's not the
Right.
external event. And we see that a lot with like people that make it to the NFL, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are never as happy as they are sitting at that table waiting for their name to be called. And as
Yeah.
soon as it does, and they're like, oh, well, we made it. Now what?
Now what?
Yeah.
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 It's the pursuit, right? I
Exactly.
think that's where happiness is found. It's not in finding, same thing with me, with seeking God, seeking a relationship with a power greater than myself. And every time I read something spiritual, or I'm digging into that, I'm feeling like, I'm getting closer, I'm learning something new. That's where I feel,
Yeah.
the most connected to something outside of myself. But going back to something you mentioned earlier, we say hindsight is 2020. Pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth. Without our bottom, we wouldn't be where we are. All these things. But I think when I think back to, at least I can only put it in context of myself, that innermost self, that innermost desire of me to feel significant and to want to be a valuable person in the lives of other people,
Mm-hmm.
that has been provided. And it's not up to me to decide that the path that maybe that was the path I needed
Mm-hmm.
in order to serve my purpose the way that I can.
Yeah.
I can look back and say, well, I could have done without the ass bleeding, but maybe I couldn't have. I wouldn't have been able to get to where you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe I would not have been able to do the things I've done without that much pain.
Right.
And we can get off the elevator anytime we want, right? And maybe your elevator's level 5 and mine was level 15 or whatever. So when we're like, that going back to in the thick of it, it's like, I think when we ask for things, right? When we pray and when we meditate, when we ask for things, the answers may not look the way we think they are. It
Yep.
feels like it means everything should just go right and everything should work out the way that I've determined in my mind because I've designed a path and everything's going to go great. Every sales call I have means I'm going to win every piece of business.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if you pray for patience, you'll get a whole lot of scenarios where you are aggravated to where you have to practice patience and then
Yeah.
you wind up
Yeah.
really patient,
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
So well
so
said.
when you're in that messy middle,
Yeah.
you may be being provided exactly what you need to get you where you innermost desire to be.
On your
It
journey.
may not be where you're articulating.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. It's all part of a journey. Everything that we experience leads us to the next chapter. And only thing we've got to do is continue on the journey, right? Not
Yeah.
question it.
Yeah.
Philip, such a great episode. You're, like I said in the beginning before we started, you're a breath of fresh air. Everything you've said is so relevant, and we're so glad you had here. All right, so we've talked about a lot of things, a lot of things. This is an episode that I have mentally marked to go back and listen to. I've already thought about who I'm going to share this with. But let's change our lives now. Think of me, think of Seema, think of our listener. What's one thing someone listening to this right now can implement today that you are beyond 100% confident that if they do this, and with a little bit of compounding, a little bit of time, it will definitively change their life in short order? Because we want instant gratification. We want to know that we listened to Phillip Naithram and he made us better.
Okay. It's one practice, but it's 3 parts.
Good. That's a threefer.
One practice, but it's 3 parts. It takes all of 5 minutes. Get a piece of paper, use your hands. Not the thumbs and the typing and all this other shit that we like to do. Write it down, 5 things that you're grateful for, right? 5 things that you believe right now that you want to be different, you wish were different. Things that you actually truly think about life, about yourself, about the world, but that you want to be different, that you feel like you wish it weren't like this. So start with the 5 gratefuls. Write those things down. Right next to it, write the opposite of it. Like, what would it look like if it were different? So that's 2 steps, right? Do those 2 things. Then get up and walk in and look into the mirror. Make eye contact with your subconscious. It's not a secret. I mean, it was in the book, The Secret, but it's not a secret. When we say that the eyes are the windows to the soul, we're saying that that's how we register our subconscious. Speak to yourself. Speak those gratefuls, those 5 gratefuls out loud, and then speak the positive side of that thing you want to change about your life that you wish was different. And say it in the possessive. I have this. I am that. Whatever it is, but speak to it as if it's already true. And do that. And it's going to feel so dumb. When you first start doing it, you're going to be like, what am I doing? You're going to feel a little bit of warmth in your body, that embarrassment, sort of like flushiness in your cheeks. That's just your body getting used. That's your subconscious waking up to like, oh, he's going to listen to me now.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah.
That's not embarrassment. We've just always felt that feeling when we were embarrassed. But do that and try it for a week, right? If you want to try it for a second week, try it for a second week. And you'll have your own experience with it, but it's 3 steps. It's one thing. It's just your morning routine. Just do that. 5 gratefuls. Start, and it doesn't have to be the same grateful. It could be the same grateful every day. It doesn't have to be, but if your hands and feet both work, that's one thing.
Yeah.
You know, if you ate yesterday, if you took a shower, I take cold showers on purpose, but I have hot water. Right? Most of us use the bathroom and we hit a button and it just goes away. We have no idea where it goes. Like you slept inside, not outside. Like start with the basics of gratitude.
It has to be really small.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're almost challenging people to say things other than the obvious, like, I have a job, I have, like, which can be, depending on where you're at, a really big deal. But the smaller you can get, the more quote unquote sneaky you can get to truly feel gratitude for those things.
Yeah. I found that nail clipper yesterday.
Yeah. The impact gets bigger the smaller you go.
Right.
Yeah. And if you're struggling, listeners, for that 5th elusive gratitude thing on your list tomorrow morning, I'll give you a hint or a suggestion. You're grateful for the Happy and Human podcast. All right, Seema. That was great, Philip.
That was amazing. Okay, so we have on this show a little tradition called Ask It Forward.
Okay.
So basically, the last guest has left a question for you without knowing who you are. And so we ask you the question and you get to answer, but then you get to actually turn the tables and ask a question forward of the next guest. We don't know who that person is. They don't know who they are, right? But it's just a way of sort of weaving in continuity with our guests and kind of getting our guests to get to know each other a little bit and connect with each other. So are you ready?
Lay it on me.
All right. So this question is from Dr. Supriya Rao, who is, she is in adult gastroenterology in Boston. Her question for you is what role model in your life was most influential?
What role model in my life was most influential throughout my entire life? Yeah, I had a boss. I wasn't quite bottoming out just yet. This is my first like job. First, like, well, they're all jobs, but this was the first. I got to get dressed up every day, first professional job, and I looked at this person, and somewhere along the line, I think it was a football coach that gave me the idea. He's like, find the most senior person in the office and emulate that person. Hop in their back pocket, do the same thing you do with, like, be a leader, be a captain. If you want what they have, do what they do, right? That sort of thing. And he was the senior vice president. He was the person in charge of the group. And it was the first time I had tried to practice like what I was taught to do. And I don't know, I was really nervous, but it worked. I asked to meet with him and I said, look, I'm young. Here's some of the things I'd like to do in my career or just in life. And I'd love to get your advice. And he gave it to me. And he took a purposeful approach with me. Like he gave me, if I wanted to schedule time with him, he would give me 15 minutes, 30 minutes. But I learned so much from watching him work and watching him behave and the way he talked about his kids, the way he talked about his wife, what he wanted to do, like for his family, like why he was doing what he was doing. And he was very good about doing that. He didn't have to deny that he was in charge and that he was my boss. And he never crossed a boundary. He wasn't my friend. I knew that. He was, but I think that that time I always thought about, even when I was in the thick of it, in that messy middle, when I was learning my lessons. And now I think I try to emulate a lot of that with the people that I work with and in my own company and with client companies. And I think those are the things, those characteristics are what every step of the way, when I've had other mentors and other people that I follow and read and learn from, there's a tie there. And I don't think I've ever thought about that until kind of now. So I appreciate you asking me that.
So cool. Well, thanks for sharing. And now you get to ask your question.
Yeah. You know what? Get them to give a little bit of a eulogy for themselves. When they transition out, what do they want people to know about them? Those people that show up, what do they want them to say about them? Who do they want to know that they're coming to celebrate? That we got to know this person, in this experience, in this lifetime. And this is what we know about them.
Boy, you came to play, didn't you?
Yeah.
I love it.
That's a good one. We've not had that one or anything like it actually yet.
Absolutely. As a nod to everything you've accomplished and your life, and as to appreciate the time you spent with us, we ask our guests to identify an organization or a cause that is near and dear to their heart, that on behalf of you will make a charitable contribution to that organization to help bring awareness to different causes. We want to spread the impact. We want to show our appreciation for the time you've spent with you. Is there a cause or an organization that's near and dear to you that we can make a charitable donation to on behalf of you?
There is. It's if you're looking on the web, it's 99, the 2 letter 9s, 99legacyfund.org.
Okay.
And so it's the class of 1999, the graduating class of 1999 from West Point Legacy Fund. Part of they've been losing some folks to suicide, and they do a lot of work with PTSD for veterans and people transitioning out, their family members, and all of the people that's affected. But these are the people that have served us, and that group is a great way for us to serve them. So I'd love for that to be the group.
Tell us why. Tell us why is this particular organization important to you?
Well, I've gotten to spend a lot of time with some special operators. All of them have been West Point grads. I interviewed the dean of West Point for my podcast, The Jumping Point, and those people have made a huge positive impact in my life. They've also asked me to host their podcast, We Got Your Six, and the stories that we're carrying forward. They're just doing a lot of great work. And these are the most humble and selfless service. Like, they really define that in everything they do. And they've been able to, they're continuing to be of service to my life, even after their transition out of the military, just even in the everyday conversations we get to have. And some of the thoughts and I don't know, it's just made a huge impact on my life. And I want more people to know who they are and what they're about, because we need it.
Thank you. That is great. We're happy to support and bring awareness to that organization and everything you talked about. It's great.
Yeah. Thank you so
This
much.
has been fun.
Where, Phillip, can our audience find you if they want you to come and do a keynote speech, or if they just want to hire you as a coach, or if they're looking to create a workshop or something and you are their guy? Where do they find you?
Yeah, I think the best way is LinkedIn. I try to do as much as I can on LinkedIn to put out free resources, free guides, free practices to develop self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, motivate your team, interpersonal skills. I focus my attention on emotional intelligence. We can hire, inspire, and perform every level of the organization. We're software enabled. Execucom is the name of the company.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you could follow me on LinkedIn, that would be great. From there, you'll get all the links to the podcast, the newsletters, ways to connect with me. I answer DMs within 24 hours. I'm a real person. I really want to take the human-centered approach, happy and human, to building this business, and to everywhere I speak, every keynote I give, every workshop, every consulting package that we create. If if you're like a lot of the companies that we help, where you're struggling with either employee retention, just this conflict of communication and friction within your executive team and your company's disengagement, or just not getting people in the door fast enough. You're growing, even in an economy like this, you just can't get people in the door fast enough. We've developed a process and a framework with people data and emotional intelligence that solves that problem.